In this video, we are going to understand what is an operating system. So अगर हम अपनी डे टू डे लाइफ की बात करें तो the most common computers that we use are personal computers or laptops, or these days we also use smartwatches. So what constitutes the hardware of these computers? Hardware comprises of things that we can see or touch. सबसे पहले जब हम एक कंप्यूटर को देखते हैं we can see its monitor or the screen, we can see its keyboard, we can see mouse, we can see the trackpad. All of these form part of the computer hardware, and these form what you call as IO devices or input output devices. Other than this, कंप्यूटर के अंदर भी कुछ ऐसे पार्ट्स हैं which form part of the computer hardware. For example, कंप्यूटर का CPU that is the central processing unit, and then computer की memory can be of different types. Memory could be your hard disk or disk memory or RAM. Coming back to operating systems, what is an operating system? If I try to define operating systems in one line, operating system is a software that manages computer hardware. As a user perspective से अगर मैं बात करूं, users want to run apps on the hardware. Apps जैसे कि Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, the web browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, some mobile applications like WhatsApp, Instagram, all of these are apps जो हम day to day basis पे कंप्यूटर हार्डवेयर पे रन करना चाहते हैं, राइट? इसको थोड़ा सा डीप में एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए, because these apps that I talked about are pretty complex, let us take an example of a very simple C code. The job of this code is to just print hello on the screen. The screen here refers to the computer monitor. So the expectation of this code is कि आपका जो भी लैपटॉप है उसके मॉनिटर पे you want to print hello. Now this forms a IO device. Monitor is basically an output device, and the expectation of this code is that we want to print hello on the monitor. But इस code में अगर आप देखें, it is a very simple straightforward code. There is nothing that is interacting with the monitor or the screen hardware and saying it कि okay अपनी screen पे hello print करवाओ. So there needs to be something in between, some layer that is hiding the details of how the word hello gets printed on this monitor. And that is where operating systems come into picture. So again, I will start with the original one-line definition. That is, operating system is a software that manages computer hardware. As a user, if we see, let's say we are user, what do we want to do? We want to use various apps, and the expectation from these apps is that they will interact with the hardware as and when required. And the hardware over here includes CPU, memory, including disk memory and RAM memory, and certain input output devices like keyboard and monitor. Now let us think of the workflow. The user basically is running an application on a computer. The user is directly interacting with this application, and further this application wants to interact with the computer hardware. But like we saw, it is not easy for this app to directly interact with the hardware, because for that it will need to know the details of how the hardware is working, what are the commands or the codes that are required for the hardware to function as expected. And not just that, this is just one app. There could be multiple apps. There could be app 1, there could be app 2, there could be app 3 that are simultaneously running, and all of these want to interact with the hardware components. And this is where operating system or OS comes into picture. So the workflow then becomes that the user can again interact with the applications can interact back with the users, and if the apps want to interact with the hardware, that can be made possible via the operating system, which encapsulates the working of the hardware. So apps do not directly interact with the hardware. So if we try to understand the responsibilities of an operating system, number one would be to enable use of computer resources. Number two will be to coordinate use of the different computer resources. Coordinate in the sense that, since I mentioned key, there can be several user applications running at the same time, there needs to be some mechanism that coordinates, synchronizes, and schedules the usage of computer hardware by these applications. That is the job of the operating system. And thirdly, security. The apps that are running need to be isolated from each other and should be doing an optimal usage of the computer resources. When we are understanding what is an operating system, we also need to understand a core of the operating system, which is called kernel. We can think of kernel as the heart of the operating system. Kernel is the core component that manages various resources like CPU, memory, input-output devices, and the earlier operating system responsibilities that we just discussed. That is all about this video. See you in the next one.